Hello, I'm Weather Channel meteorologist Jim Cantori, and on behalf of the American Red Cross, I'd like to welcome you to Disaster Services and Fulfilling Our Mission, translating your compassion into community action. You have come to an organization whose core mission is responding to disasters. Moreover, you've chosen to help your community prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters and emergencies at a historic moment in disaster response. Your willingness to serve your community and your ability to understand its unique needs in crisis have never been more valuable, more necessary than now. In return, you will receive what is invaluable, the joy and the satisfaction of helping others in need through the services Red Cross provides. I know that feeling, because when I'm out in the field covering a storm, I always see the Red Cross working with the local community. It's comforting to know that a key part of our preparedness team is already in place. The purpose of this course is to literally enable you to translate your caring and compassion into community action. By translate, we mean that you can determine how you can best deliver quality service during a disaster, working through the Red Cross in partnership with other individuals and organizations in your community. When disaster strikes, many people want to help and do more than just give money, but not all know how to do so, particularly when it's really needed. And what's most effective is a collaborative, coordinated response, whether it's a fire in an apartment building up the block or a large and devastating hurricane or earthquake. By the end of this course, you will have learned how to identify specific opportunities to translate your compassion into action. Remember, it all starts with you. You will learn about the mission of the Red Cross and about the principles and values that support our mission from people who have worked disasters as Red Cross volunteers, employees, partners, and clients, those who have been personally impacted by disaster themselves. By the time you finish fulfilling our mission, you'll be ready to apply our fundamental principles and values to all the decisions and actions you will take in response to a disaster. You'll see demonstrated again and again how the Red Cross mission is the rock-solid foundation on which to reach out to others in a variety of partnerships unique to your community. Together, you and your partners will build bridges, break down barriers, and craft plans to help prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters and other emergencies.
Welcome to American Red Cross. Thank you very much.
You'll come to know the 5 constituent groups of the Red Cross, who they are in your community, and how their needs may differ. We'll get started by taking a look at different communities as they respond to a disaster using resources that are always present but not always active. We'll consider the impact of a disaster on a community, and we'll break down the process through which communities prepare, respond, and recover from disasters. Next, we'll see the critical role played by the Red Cross as part of a community's response to disaster. And we'll hear from a wide range of disaster services personnel about how their response is guided by our mission, fundamental principles, and values. Emergencies come in all sizes, and we'll explain how the Red Cross disaster response is organized to collaborate with our partners so all community needs from single-family fires to catastrophic hurricanes are met. Finally, we'll lay out the next steps for helping your community prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters, whether you work for the Red Cross or want to help out in some other capacity. When you complete this course, you will be the right person in the right place, doing the right work when disaster strikes. You will have joined some of the wide-ranging and committed partnerships between the Red Cross and your community: disaster relief, advocacy and faith-based groups, businesses and civic organizations. You will play a crucial role in your community's disaster response plan. Yours will be the face of disaster response. So what makes up the fabric of a community? Whether neighborhood, town, large city, or suburb, the fabric of a community is woven into existence by the people who live there. Communities come in all locations, sizes, ethnicities, and cultural heritages. The fabric of each community is unique and diverse.
We're located in San Francisco Chinatown, home to one of the largest populations of Chinese residents in the country. And in San Francisco Chinatown, many of the seniors live by themselves, and they only speak Cantonese, which is why it's important for us to work with this community.
Our community here in the Fort Lauderdale area is very diverse, multicultural. Creole, Spanish area.
A block away from where we live is a wonderful little Turkish grocery store, and a mile away from us is a really nice large Korean grocery.
While each community is distinctly different in so many ways, communities also have groups of people in common. From schools, churches, civic and charitable organizations, to recreational and social entities, businesses, and government agencies. Many of these groups have formed partnerships, since working together in a crisis is far more effective than working alone. When a disaster tears the fabric of a community, people depend on the teamwork and resources these partnerships bring to bear.
Responding to a disaster is a huge task for a local government and for different volunteer agencies. So it's always important to be looking out for new partners that can help you with the task.
We are part of a community. There is no one agency, no matter how proficient, no matter how large, they can provide all the services that are needed in an emergency.
When there's a hurricane approaching or a tragedy approaching, we're the closest shelter to the Keys and also to Homestead and South Dade. And the people are afraid when there's a hurricane approaching, especially any category today. So they come to the shelter seeking protection, and this is why we're always filled here at Robert Morgan.
Emergency responders such as police and fire and rescue provide life-saving services immediately following a disaster. Then, the Red Cross and other public, private, and nonprofit organizations provide further assistance.
In terms of disaster response, we currently have 31 case managers that are trained specifically in disaster case management. They're currently working in the Gulf Coast to assist with the recovery efforts in Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. If another disaster were to come, we would be able to deploy these case managers to the new location since they are already trained. They can help identify cultural leaders within the community where an Asian population may have been affected by a disaster.
I was a part of the AmeriCorps NPRC, National Preparedness and Response Corps, with the Red Cross this past year. And it was a great experience. I was able to go out into the field and work a disaster relief assignment.
When disaster strikes, people's first reaction is to reach out to resources they know and trust.
The community as a whole really opened its arms to help us with our shelter and other shelters as well, not just the one at our church, but the community as a whole, from young, old, all racial, ethnic backgrounds, retired, active, it did not matter.
After organizations in a community respond to a disaster, they must recover from it, which often means restoring and rebuilding from single-family homes to whole infrastructures.
When Katrina hit, about 40,000 Vietnamese Americans were affected throughout the communities in the Gulf Coast. And the majority of them ended up evacuating to Houston, Texas. And rather than going to the mega shelters and to the George R. Brown Convention Center, they ended up at the Hong Kong City 4 Mall, which sounds a little strange, but it's the hub of Vietnamese and Asian life in Houston. And because BPSOS has a branch office located directly inside the mall, we ended up serving as a de facto disaster relief and recovery center for those individuals that were not able to seek refuge or were afraid to seek refuge and assistance from other sources.
Volunteer Fairfax, after the last flood, was very involved in cleaning up people's houses directly. They went into the basements and actually helped get mud out and take down drywall and do all these things that is way outside the scope of the Red Cross, but absolutely essential for the people that are trying to fix their homes. The rule of thumb I heard is it takes about 10 times longer for the relief than for the immediate response, and it takes about 10 times longer for the recovery than the relief.
Understanding the makeup of your community enables you to build relationships that provide the resources and services needed when disaster strikes.
We partnered greatly with the First Baptist Church during our Wilma disaster. And we saw that volunteers from all around the country and locally, and even the members of the church, came together for one purpose, and that purpose was to serve the community.
No matter what size, large or small, a disaster rips apart people's lives. The impact may affect one household or a whole community. That impact may resonate for just a few days or years as people recover by repairing and mending a fabric that will never be exactly the same.
When our community is affected, it's not just the individuals and the families who are affected directly because of that tornado or those floods, but the community is impacted, the infrastructure, the transportation, the business.
It was really amazing to realize the depth of the needs that these people had. They had needs for food, clothing, shelter, counseling. They had all kinds of emotional needs they were going through by being displaced from their home, from their community.
Community responders never know when the call for help will come.
Many times I got the call, that call in the middle of the night that you prepare so well for. It's at 2:30 in the morning, and it takes you a while to understand that you're about to go to a 3-alarm fire and help a lot of people.
National media attention usually focuses on large-scale natural disasters or terrorist events.
A large-scale disaster leaves a community without the ability to function. You can't communicate. In many instances, you won't have electricity for weeks upon weeks.
We had so many people, mainly housed in our gymnasium and our Family Life Center, and we had predicted that we could handle about 400 people. But just putting them in cots took up not only the gym floor, but also upstairs. So we had really overbooked, but there was a need, so we wanted everybody to be able to come in. They had nothing when they came, so once they had a bunk and started finding clothes and people started helping by giving things, that became their home, their bunk.
Although local emergencies like single-family and apartment fires and even flooding may go unnoticed nationally, they make up the vast majority of disasters, and they can have a huge impact on the lives of those affected.
We had a house fire a few years ago, and the fire department was on the scene for about 2 or 3 hours. We were living in a hotel for about 2 weeks because it wasn't fit for habitation, but it took 6 months before we could actually have a fully recovered house.
One of the things it really showed us was that when we go out to talk to people who've been in the disaster, our responsibility is to talk to every one of them. That people's individual responses are really potentially very different from each other, and we need to have talked to everybody there at that disaster event, in that family unit that we meet.
Whether the disaster is small or large, an apartment fire, earthquake, hurricane, tornado, or flood, the immediate needs of those affected are the same: food, clothing, shelter, emotional support, and information about the path to recovery delivered in a sensitive and compassionate way.
In a disaster, it's a tremendous equalizer. It doesn't really matter what happened before. The question is, what do they need?
During the Katrina evacuation and sheltering, we provided psychologists that would just come on site and walk around and just observe the environment and be available if a situation arose that someone would need to talk to someone about what they were going through.
The best way to minimize the impact of a disaster and make sure the needs of those who have been affected are met is by using all the resources in the community.
One unique partnership that we have ongoing is with the Texas prison system. Everything from laundry to helping to do food service to warehousing, refrigeration trucks, anything that we asked, if they had it, they gave it to us.
Well, in our case is the Unity Council. That's a very influential agency in the Spanish-speaking community here in Oakland. And we know that in times of disaster, people are going to turn to them. So we understand that. So we need to not only identify and establish a relationship, but we need to continue to cultivate that.
Most of all, people impacted by any type or size of disaster need reassurance that they will be safe and will get help in restoring their lives to normalcy.
I personally was on the media action team, and I would be called out and dispatched with the disaster action team. And oftentimes I would arrive with the emergency services personnel, volunteers and staff members. Sometimes I would arrive before them depending on the location. And I'll never forget how rewarding it was when you were the person that was able to tell people affected by disaster that everything was going to be okay. I still get a little emotional. It's rewarding, and then you forget that you were actually called at 2:30 in the morning.
Those communities most successful when coping with disaster work together to make the fabric stronger and more resilient than before the disaster strikes. The community response to disaster commonly has 3 general phases: prepare, respond, recover. The first phase is preparation. The more a community coordinates together to prepare prior to a disaster, the better the response will be. Preparation demands collaboration among nonprofit organizations, faith-based groups, large and small businesses, and government agencies.
During a response, collaboration is key. There are so many different aspects of a disaster response that there is no one agency that can take care of the whole job. And this takes years and months of preparation and reaching out. And now we've all learned that collaborating just makes sense.
When a disaster strikes a community, things can get quite chaotic in a hurry. So it's important to know your folks and know what teams you're going to be playing with and interacting with before the disaster strikes.
We need to talk to the key person. We need to go to schools and talk to the key persons, train them, and give them everything that they need so they can talk to families and spread the word.
Preparation requires foresight, cooperation, tenacity, and creativity.
The title of the event, Un Sábado por la Familia, the literal translation is A Saturday for Your Family. And the reason why we do that is because it's a targeted way of reaching the Latino community. This is the Fruitville Village, as you can see. This is predominantly where the Spanish-speaking residents of Oakland live. They go to work here, they come eat here, they come to church here, they come get their social services. Again, this is really the heart of this neighborhood, so we wanted to bring the event to where the action is happening.
Communities must be ready to respond at a moment's notice.
You have to be very, very flexible and try to adapt to the changing needs.
It's like a ball game. You would never think of going out and fielding a team without practice, preparation, a game plan, and proper tools. But to me, that's our business.
Being ready also means marshaling the resources the community requires if disaster strikes.
In order for a school to be designated as a hurricane evacuation center, it must meet the requirements set out in a structural survey. So engineers visit the schools and look at their drawing plans as well as roof structure, windows, different considerations with storm surge and flooding to make sure that these are safe buildings that we're offering for the community.
I do recall another situation where one of the local large grocery stores came by with a huge truck of donated food to the people that were staying here.
We also have supplies that we stock ahead of time. We do dry run drills so that we know we can open quickly. Such things as logistics. Where do we set up our registration? Where do we set up our sleeping areas? Where do we set up our feeding areas? Who is going to man our kitchen? Who is going to plan meals? All of that is determined ahead of time.
Local businesses and civic organizations become involved in the preparation phase as well.
We work closely with voting officials to make sure that when an election is approaching, that polling places are accessible and that the needs of people with disabilities are met. We're hoping that we can replicate the same kind of process with the American Red Cross and its volunteers to make sure that when a disaster happens in the future, they'll be prepared to meet the full range of needs of the entire disability community.
Most people associate disasters with the immediate response. That's because it's in the drama of disaster response that the media is most involved. Emergency responders are on the scene. Individuals and families are displaced from their homes, and people may need to be rescued.
Once an emergency happens, there is no time to plan. There is only time to react.
Communication and collaboration and cooperation. It's got to be approached on that level if it's really going to be effective.
Following Hurricane Rita, I received a phone call just as I was getting off a plane from Dallas. I had gone onto the jetway, turned my cell phone on. First call that comes through is, "Can you open?" Not "hello, how are you?" Just, "Can you open?" I knew the call was coming at some point, and my response was, "Yes, I can open."
The response phase can be a time of great hardship. It's a time requiring the utmost in sensitivity and respect for those affected by the disaster.
We had to hit the ground running. And because we had prepared ahead of time, because we had had dry run drills on setting up a shelter in a matter of minutes, we knew what to do, and everyone who walked through the door knew immediately what task had to be performed, where the supplies were, and what we needed to do to become functional in literally a matter of minutes.
When we're going out and responding to a fire, we're not sure what the people inside that fire might be speaking, what language they might be speaking. We have a language bank available for helping us with that. We've had people that have been disabled in different ways, and that provides a different set of challenges to make sure that we provide a place for them where they're going to have access to the facilities.
When there is a disaster, the hurricane or other natural disaster or any major need that the Red Cross needs support, we join forces with them and we provide meals so the Red Cross can take them to different areas in the community.
After the initial response to people's immediate needs, the fabric of the community must be mended and restored. This recovery phase can take a long time.
The longer term phase is the recovery phase. It takes a long time to rebuild a house, let alone a community after a disaster. And in that, the community has to really take responsibility for themselves, maybe with some help from the federal government, but maybe not, trying to make things right again.
Being able to recover from a disaster is really a team effort, and that includes everyone from the level of a community resident to the local government, as well as the different nonprofits like Red Cross that are involved. It's a real big task for someone to consider looking after the mass care needs, the sheltering, the feeding, the emotional, mental health well-beings of a community. So it takes all the partners coming together with one clear plan and focus to make sure we can meet the needs of those residents.
After communities recover from disasters, they consider how they can better prepare for future disasters.
Our work, that is Church World Services staff out in the field, is to bring together local community leaders. Could be faith-based organizations, community-based, could be businesses, could be civic organizations. Bring the whole leadership of the community together to think through how we're going to help people who are falling through the cracks rebuild after a disaster.
We feel that our partnership with the American Red Cross is a good partnership, a very healthy partnership. But as the demands of disaster relief grow, we realize that we've got to grow our relationship. That's going to mean more coordination. It's going to mean more cross-training, particularly of leadership, both on the national and state level, chapter level, and we're anxious to do that.
The opportunities to serve are endless. You can be on the front lines or work behind the scenes. You can help prepare your community, be a part of an immediate response, or help in the recovery from a disaster. Whatever you do, you'll play a vital role in your community. We have looked at how communities respond to disasters. Now we'll learn how the American Red Cross carries out its mission to relieve human suffering caused by disaster by helping people mend the tears in the fabric of their lives. The Red Cross has had a long history of disaster response, starting with Clara Barton, who expanded our mission from serving those involved in military conflicts to those affected by natural disasters. Clara Barton's passion for helping people continues today. Each year, the Red Cross responds to more than 70,000 disasters, including house fires that actually make up over 90% of all Red Cross disaster responses. Whether it's house fires, the epic hurricane season of 2005, the Oklahoma City bombing, or events of September 11, 2001, the mission of the American Red Cross is carried out in communities across the nation every day.
I think about part of our mission statement says we help people prevent, prepare, and respond to disaster.
The fundamental principles of the American Red Cross, which were defined at the 1965 20th International Conference of the Red Cross, are applied when we respond to every disaster. These 7 principles guide our actions. We live them day to day as we serve those in need.
Everybody needs help. We all need to be helping each other as a community. Some people need to be acting consciously with those principles in mind.
The principle of humanity states that we endeavor to prevent and alleviate human suffering wherever it may be found. We protect life and health and respect every human being.
When we're thinking about providing service to those in need and cultural diversities, obviously we think of the language, but we also really need to be a lot more open-minded and think about them and how they live, their styles, their preferences.
For me, our pastor, David Valentine, when the evacuees came in on the buses, we had 9 buses from New Orleans that came from the Superdome, and they had been on the bus ever since they left. They pulled up out front about 1:30 in the morning, and he got on each bus and told them, I know that you're scared, I know you've been through a lot, but you're coming into a completely safe environment.
The principle of impartiality states that the Red Cross makes no discrimination as to nationality, race, religious beliefs, class, or political opinions.
One of the important fundamentals to me that I've seen at the Red Cross that really takes an impact on my life is impartiality. And the fact that, they don't have a barrier in nationality, race, or religious belief, or even politics. What that does is to open up to the whole human race.
The principle of neutrality states that in order to sustain the confidence of everyone we serve, we do not take sides in hostilities or engage in political, racial, religious, or any other controversy.
In order for the American Red Cross to carry out its mission, it's important that our volunteers, our paid staff, and most importantly, the people who we serve in disaster understand and appreciate and believe that all they need in order to come to us is to be in need of disaster relief or some form of assistance, and that is without regard for race, color, age, sex, orientation, national origin, religion, any of those kinds of categories we will not view in any way as a means to keep people out from receiving services from us.
The principle of independence states that we maintain our autonomy so we can act at all times in accordance with our mission, principles, and values. We are not a government agency or funded by the government.
It's important that people who work with us understand that we are truly an independent agency. There is an erroneous perception out there that we are an arm or a part of the federal government, and we are not. We are really a nonpartisan organization, and we are set up that way purposely so that no one feels that because of their political affiliation or any other constraint that we are not able to provide services without regard to any kind of boundary. And so in order for us to do that effectively, then we must proclaim and fiercely defend our independence as an organization.
Probably no principle is more associated with the Red Cross than voluntary service. For we are a voluntary relief movement. We are people helping people.
Voluntary service is one of the fundamental principles for the Red Cross. And that is something that has always been part of our family values. My mother, I remember seeing a picture of her rolling bandages right here in Chinatown for the Red Cross during World War II.
In any disaster, especially the large ones, when we know there are so many people affected and so many needs, there is always also a lot of other people who aren't affected that want to help. And we have an excellent opportunity through American Red Cross Disaster Services to allow, if you will, a lot of other people as volunteers to get into service.
The fundamental principle I embrace the most is voluntary service. Through a partnership between the American Red Cross and the AmeriCorps, I've had the opportunity to spend a year volunteering with the Red Cross.
The last two principles are global in nature. The principle of unity states that there can only be one Red Cross or Red Crescent Society in any one country, and that it must be open to all people.
We want to have people understand that we are really one Red Cross, and that's whether we're operating here in the United States or whether we are supporting our sister organizations around the world. We believe that in order to function effectively, we want to train people from Maine who can work in California, people in Oregon who could work in Florida, people from Michigan who could work down in the Gulf states. And in order to be able to do that, we want to have people who are culturally competent. And we are putting an increased emphasis on that as we move the organization further into the 21st century.
Unity makes it all possible. Everyone working as one, delivering the services and living the mission through the Red Cross makes their work possible in the community.
The principle of universality states that all the National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies have equal status and share equal responsibilities and duties in helping each other worldwide.
There are, of course, other Red Cross organizations around the world, and we go to their aid just as they come to our aid. Examples would be the tragedies of September 11th. Many other Red Crosses around the world came to our aid, and so there has to be a fundamental belief in the principles of how we operate so that we can support our sister organizations all over the world.
As part of the Red Cross, these 7 principles will guide your decisions in responding to disasters, large or small, next door or around the globe. We all have value systems that we use to make decisions about our lives. Our values offer insights about our character, our cultural heritage, our communities, and much, much more. Successful disaster response is more than providing basic emergency needs. It also consists of the manner in which our services are provided. The American Red Cross has a set of values that we use to provide disaster services. Let's take a look at how we integrate Red Cross values into the work we do. We hold ourselves accountable for our own performance, our unit's performance, and that of the whole Red Cross. Through accountability, we take ownership for the end result, keep promises, and follow through on commitments.
To what degree am I willing to accept some responsibility and be accountable, if you will, for our positive response?
We collaborate and work as one Red Cross team. Not only do different parts of the Red Cross work together, but the Red Cross partners with the community to meet their needs.
Disaster planning is really a year-long activity for us, and we are in constant communication with Red Cross, the public schools, and other volunteer organizations active in disaster to make sure we're ready at any time.
We demonstrate drive, perseverance, and commitment to results.
The level of commitment of Red Cross volunteers is something that I had never seen before. I doubt I'll ever live it again. because Red Cross volunteers really, once this is in their system, they're in it for life.
We act with respect, sensitivity, and openness, proving our trustworthiness. We demonstrate the highest level of integrity and stewardship by operating in the best interest of those we serve and those who trust us with their lives and their contributions.
When you're able to speak the language of the resident, you have the trust that's built with that.
In return, they will give you their trust and confidence, and they will help us to train more people.
Our passion for humanitarianism is reflected in all that we do and how we preserve people's dignity in times of hardship.
There was a disaster action call and a family's house had burned down, and listening to them helped them put things together. And that's often what you're doing. You're someone there. You're someone offering someone a pencil and paper or just an ear. You're just there so someone can tell their story.
At the American Red Cross, we think about the community in terms of 5 key groups of constituents: clients, partners, workers, both volunteers and employees, donors, and the general public. Our ability to satisfy our constituents is the ultimate determinant of our success. It's a balancing act because each constituent group has its own expectations. Our clients, those people who we serve, before, during, and after disaster, need quick and efficient service for all their immediate emergency needs. Our clients reflect the infinite diversity of our nation.
And it's really important for us to learn more and more about the community and the partnerships and things that are out there so that we can become better informed, of the things that are out there for them. I mean, one of the things we're doing is we're not always necessarily providing direct services, but we're often providing information about where they can go to learn more about something that's a need or a concern of theirs.
Red Cross works with partners in the community to provide relief. Our partnerships are a critical part of any successful disaster response.
One of the things I enjoy about our relationship with the American Red Cross is I think in America, it's absolutely one of the best models of a strategic alliance. In other words, 2 organizations that aren't exactly alike. They come out of different roots, different backgrounds, but they do have a common purpose, and that's to help people in a time of need. And so we've come together and said, we may not be exactly alike, but we're enough alike that we need to work together.
In terms of perception, that's been a plus for the Red Cross and for the NAACP. Real work getting done, transforming lives, helping people, that has been a part of what we've done. And so it's been a win-win for NAACP and for Red Cross.
The most effective partnerships are made long before the disaster strikes, so that methods of working together are in place ahead of time.
Where there is little or no communication before a disaster, there's likely to be little or no communication during a disaster.
An example of an effective pre-established partnership is the one between the American Red Cross and the American Translators Association to meet a community's non-English speaking communications needs when disaster strikes.
The Red Cross partnership with the American Translators Association provides the Red Cross with access to professional interpreters and translators so that it will have trained interpreters ready to deploy at a moment's notice.
Thus far, over 100 ATA members have been certified to serve as Red Cross volunteers. So that provides us a database of volunteers to go to should we need their services.
Our volunteers, who make up 96% of our workers, reflect the diversity of our community. They expect a meaningful work experience that enables them to use their individual skills, abilities, and experiences to help others.
There were large sheltering operations during a hurricane a few years ago, and I had about 100 or 200 volunteers ready to face a Category 5 hurricane. And while everyone in the county was thinking of evacuating, these volunteers were there to be able to shelter. So that call, you know, you saw it as a community, you saw how people really united and decided to be one Red Cross, and that was a beautiful thing to see.
The American public has placed their trust in us for over a century. They expect us to alleviate the suffering of those affected by a disaster and start them on the road to recovery.
This is by far the largest mobilization ever in Red Cross history. It's going to be the longest mobilization in history. Red Cross will not close a shelter until the last person in that shelter has a safe place to return to.
Our donors want to help those affected by the disaster through their contributions to the Red Cross. They trust the Red Cross to be good stewards of their generosity.
We have so many supplies being donated that we weren't prepared for that big of a push from the community to give. Clothing, toiletries, blankets, toys, games, everything for the children you could think of.
As a coordinator of volunteer resources, my commitment first is to the volunteers. If I do my job correctly and I place them correctly, then they can serve the clients and serve the partners. And if that all works, then of course the public and the donors are happy.
Meeting the expectations of these constituents is challenging, but is inherent in the mission of our organization. Whether small or large, disasters disrupt people's lives. The majority of disasters the Red Cross responds to each year are small in scale. House fires, where either a single family or number of families are affected. Nevertheless, the impact on those affected is the same.
We had a house fire a few years ago, and after the fire, my response was relief. I was so happy my house was intact, my wife was okay, my cats were okay. My house looked like it basically had a roof, and I was very, very happy that people were walking away from it and it wasn't still on fire when I got there. I was just tremendously relieved.
A disaster is an event that affects people and causes an impact on the way they live. It doesn't matter what size it is. It's a disaster. Single family, multifamily, or many, many communities that are affected.
At the other end of the spectrum are large-scale disasters, the ones you hear about in the national media.
When we initially were activated for Katrina, we had no idea how long it was going to be, but we were willing to be open as long as we needed to.
When a larger disaster like a hurricane or earthquake strikes, the number of people with needs increases. The community's preparation and network of agencies is called into action.
Think about what's happened over the last 20+ years. Look at the size of the disasters we faced. You think about Andrew, you think about the Northridge earthquake, Midwest floods, I mean on and on and on, all the way until you get to Katrina. And just the scope of disasters alone has grown to the point that our partnership has grown with the American Red Cross. As they've grown, we have grown, and it's been a healthy relationship.
At the Red Cross, we increase the number of workers and size of our organization in relation to the increased number of people affected by the disaster. We call this scaling the disaster.
The response that we do depends on the disaster that we have. The most common type of disaster is a fire, usually a single family, sometimes an apartment, or maybe even an apartment complex. And then it scales up to wider scale natural disasters like tornadoes, flooding, or even Katrina.
There's a logical partnership between the National Disability Rights Network and its affiliates and the American Red Cross, because we are a cross-disability organization operating in every state and territory. And we can provide help in the planning and preparedness aspect to make sure that the programs run by the Red Cross are fully accessible and are ready to meet the needs of people with disabilities in any type of disaster.
Even when a large-scale disaster elicits a national or even international response, there is always the core community originally affected. No matter how large the disaster, it is the fabric of these people's lives that is impacted the most. Their long-term recovery can continue for years after people from other communities have returned home and the response has scaled down to the resources of those communities.
It takes about 10 times longer for the relief than for the immediate response. And it takes about 10 times longer for the recovery than the relief.
In this course, we've seen how a community works together to prepare for, respond to, and recover from the impact of a disaster. We've looked at how volunteering with the Red Cross during disaster response provides you with opportunities to work hand in hand with others. Now ask yourself, what resources, skills, and talent can you contribute to our mission? What are your next steps? Are they with the Red Cross or with another group? We've also learned how the people making up our communities are unique and varied, and the importance of the Red Cross reflecting that diversity in its programs, services, and volunteers.
The program basically is to educate the senior how they prepare for any emergency, and also it's kind of like grandma and grandson, they have a very good relationship. It benefits both sides.
希望咧喺千年寒啦，以後咧多嚟幫助我哋老人家，等我哋安全。
The Red Cross mission is best fulfilled by delivering timely and effective services in a manner sensitive to those we serve, and by supporting the efforts of those who share our commitments in disaster relief.
I feel very committed to it and feel very committed to the principles of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. It's a way for me to be a part of my community, and that feels really good.
Working with the Red Cross showed me such a great example of how you can react very fast in helping others.
If you believe in and are willing to support the mission, principles, and values of the American Red Cross, then we welcome you to join us in serving all communities across this great nation. On behalf of the American Red Cross, I want to be the first to welcome you to the greatest team you'll ever be a part of.